One of Amy Chua's previous prominent books was the best-selling Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. Her new book might be thought of as a battle cry against divisive politics and for what it means to be an American. It's called Political Tribes, Group Instinct and the Fate of Nations. Amy Chua is a lawyer and the John M. Duff Jr. Professor at the Yale Law School, and she joins us now for more. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've talked about your books on this program before, but we've never had you in that chair, so
it's great to be here.
Good to have you. Tribe is a very power-packed word these days, so let's get your definition of what you mean when you say it.
Okay, so there are many different usages. You could be talking about an actual tribe, like the Pashtun tribes of Afghanistan. People often use it to refer to an ethnic affiliation. I'm using it much more generally to refer to a particularly intense form of group identification. So here's the thing. Human beings are tribal animals. We need to belong. Studies show that we just absolutely crave membership. And once we connect to a group, we tend to want to cling to it and defend it no matter what, and see it as always being right. And that's actually not always bad. You know, I'm a very tribal person. Family is a kind of tribalism, sports, tribalism. The problem is when tribalism takes over the political system.
Well, as it appears to have done so in your country right now.
It really has. And the problem with that is that you start to see everything through the lens of your tribe. And it's almost like any news item will happen. Gun control, North Korea, really anything. And instead of having a conversation and thinking, what should I think? You kind of figure out what your leaders are saying. You hunker down into your positions, and then you start blasting the other side. And it doesn't even matter if 3 years ago you were saying the opposite thing. So it's really prevented people from having a conversation. And it's almost like we are in a situation, you know, studies show that one actually takes pleasure from seeing the other side lose or suffer. So in some sense, we're not really having a substantive political dialogue now, but just rather two sides trying to demonize and take down the other side.
At what point did you notice that starting to happen? That namely, it doesn't even matter if I win. It's not enough for me to win the argument. You have to lose the argument, and I don't have to listen to anything you say anymore.
Well, this stuff is documentable. It's not just a feeling. You know, if you can look at Pew Foundation studies and surveys, you can see, just take something like immigration. Even just 20 years ago, the Democrats and the Republicans, there was much more overlap. You know, it's a very complicated issue. Some people favored it, some people are against, and people change their minds. If you look at the polls right now, the Republicans are way more extreme in their views. You know, they want to cut down even on legal immigration. And the Democrats are similarly way more extreme. You know, you can't use the word illegal. We're only talking about undocumented. And there's much less convergence in the middle. And that's true of all the hot button issues. So, you know, it's been a gradual process, but part of this really is because of a demographic change that we've had.
Talk to me about that change, the demographic change that America has experienced in the last, what period of time do you think is responsible for this?
Well, it started in the 1960s when we had massive changes in our immigration laws that allowed people like my own parents to come over. And so most of the United States history, most of our immigrants came from Europe. Mm-hmm. They were white. And so for most of America's 200-year history, this was a country that was dominated economically, politically, and culturally by a white majority. Now, obviously, it's complicated who counted as white. It changed a little bit over time, but that was the basic dynamic. In the last 30 years, we've had a massive demographic change, partly just in terms of sheer numbers, you know, going from something like 600,000 a year to 7 million. Secondly, at the source of the immigration. It used to be most of our immigrants came from Europe. Now, the vast majority come from Asia, Latin America, Africa, the Caribbean. So the result is that we are seeing what people call the browning of America. And that is that for the first time in U.S. history, America's whites are on the verge of losing their status as a majority. And going to your question, when you say, when did you start to notice? That's partly what's happened. It used to be that it was the minorities who were threatened in the United States. For obvious reasons. Now, it's not just African Americans and Asian Americans who feel threatened or discriminated against. whites feel threatened. A recent study showed that 67% of America's white working class feel that they are more discriminated against than minorities. And, not just Muslims and Jews feel threatened, Christians now feel threatened. It's a big part of our political rhetoric. Men and women, straights and gays, everyone feels threatened. And when groups feel threatened, that's when they retreat into tribalism. They get more insular.
Okay, but here's the this may be a silly comparison to make, but let's make it anyway. Your country looks like it's on the verge of exploding because of all the tribalism that's happening right now. The browning that you've just described has happened in Canada as well. The city that you are in right now, the majority of the people in the capital city of Ontario were born outside this country, the majority. So it's happened here, but I don't get the sense that Canada's about to explode in the way that I do when I visit the States.
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of people in the United States did not think ever that Donald Trump would be elected. As you know, almost nobody predicted that.
No, but has he precipitated it or reflected it?
He's both. It's both.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
both. And so I would say, because this book is really comparative and looks at a lot of different places, both Europe and even developing countries, I honestly don't think anyone is immune to these demographic changes. And it does sometimes take a very inflammatory leader, a demagogic person, to come in. But there could be differences. This is something I talk about. I actually think Canada has a nice formula. You allow a lot of individual subgroup identities to flourish. One thing that we're seeing in the United States, though, is we have always had a much more kind of blatant form of patriotism. Rah-rah, USA, number one. So for all the parallels, the two countries are a little bit different. And that's part of what's going on in the United States right now. There's almost a battle for who can define the nation's identity. And there are two different visions. One that is very, it's kind of looking back to tradition, the Mad Men days, mostly white country, patriotic, USA. And one that, when you mention cities, that is much more multicultural, much more cosmopolitan, you could say much more questioning of our founding story, pointing out all the times that, these great founders you talk about, they had slaves.
Indeed.
And that's a really a point of intense disagreement right now.
No, and I don't want to come off like we're somehow immune to this. We're clearly not. In fact, some people think we experienced it before you did, in as much as Rob Ford was the mayor of Toronto, well before Donald Trump was president of the United States. But listen, as long as we're going to go back, let us, in fact, take a look back through history, because your book starts in Vietnam.
Yes.
And I guess as we're looking through a tribal lens at things with the benefit of hindsight, what was it that, in your view, the United States didn't understand about tribalism 40 and 50 years ago as they got mired in the Vietnam quagmire?
So the United States is so fascinatingly different from the way that that Great Britain was when it was in its imperial heyday. The British were so attuned to group differences when they were colonizing, and they used it to divide and conquer for, very destructive purposes, but it also gave them a lot of control. The United States tends to view its foreign policy through these grand ideological lenses. They think, it's capitalism versus communism. That's what we're doing. And then it moved to democracy versus authoritarianism. And most recently, terrorism versus, freedom. And so when we go into countries, whether it's Vietnam or Iraq, we tend to see things in terms of these great ideological battles, and we tend to think that democracy will solve everything. So it's amazing. In Vietnam, we just thought we were in there saving the country. We were going to put in capitalism. And there were two things that we didn't notice. First, we really underestimated how much of the struggle for the Vietnamese people was for their sovereignty, for independence. It wasn't for some Marxist ideology.
It was nationalism.
It was nationalism. But here's something that most people probably still don't know. There was also an internal ethnic dimension, and that is that Vietnam had what I call a market-dominant minority. Most of its capitalists actually were not part of the Vietnamese people. They belonged to this a tiny ethnic Chinese outsider minority. And a lot of Westerners will say, oh, Vietnamese, Chinese, same thing. No.
Not according to the Vietnamese.
Not at all. So we made this mistake because we were the champions of capitalism, And we actually didn't even notice that most of the capitalists in Vietnam belonged to this hated ethnic group. And we basically shot ourselves in the foot. We kept promoting capitalism and wondering why nobody wanted to come along with us and kept going to the other side.
And you could probably tell the same story in Afghanistan too, couldn't you?
In Afghanistan, we saw everything. This was after 9/11. Suddenly, we changed our lens. It wasn't about communism anymore. It was about the war on terror, the axis of evil. So we saw the Taliban as a bunch of cave-dwelling fundamentalists. Now, they are, Islamic fundamentalists, but we missed something else. The Taliban is also an ethnic movement. And it's amazing. We just ignored this. So Afghanistan is a country that has at least 14 ethnic groups, and the Pashtuns are the largest. And the Taliban is really a Pashtun nationalist movement, in a sense, in addition to being a fundamentalist group. And what we missed when we went in there is we kind of didn't realize that the Pashtuns at that time, this is a group that had founded Afghanistan, controlled it, ruled it for hundreds of years. And right around that time, they were starting to lose their dominance to these rival ethnic groups, the Uzbeks and the Tajiks. What does the US do? We are totally blind to these dynamics. Once again, we think we're going to take out, all we can think of are Islamic terrorists. And we miss the fact that we aligned ourselves when we came in militarily with the Uzbeks and the Tajiks, basically the main rivals of the Pashtuns. So we immediately, right off the bat, alienated, the very people that we were trying to win over. And that's why, even though we thought we saw a massive military victory, our leaders said, it's over, we won. Well, look, fast forward 16 years later, they're still there. The Taliban is back. And now you can see there are books and books that say the Pashtun problem, the Pashtun dilemma. But my point is we're always coming back from behind. We're always too late. After we discover this, it's like now we got to deal with this problem. But when we went in there at the beginning, we totally ignored these really important group identities that mattered most to the people on the ground.
And if you add Iraq or Libya, there are many others that you talk about in the book, to the equation, this is a problem that the American foreign policy establishment seems to make over and over and over and over. Why does it not learn?
Well, first of all, yes. That's the thesis of the book, that we, for the last at least 50 years, have been just spectacularly blind to the group identities that matter most to the people on the ground in the countries that we're supposedly trying to help or liberate. And to answer your question, why? I think it's something very distinctive about America's history. First, we have had an extraordinarily successful history of assimilation in our own country. So the thought is always, look, if Italians and Germans and Hungarians could all become Americans within a generation, hey, the Sunnis and the Shias and the Kurds, they can become Iraqis. Let's just put in some elections.
Well, except it didn't happen.
And so this is something that I've been arguing for about 20 years, which is if you look at developing countries, America always thinks that democracy is going to be the panacea for group conflict. But under certain conditions, democracy can actually catalyze group conflict.
But there was, at least I thought there was, a better understanding when it came to Iraq, that there was a Sunni, Shia, and yes, Kurds in the north split in Iraq. But America seemed to understand that. And at least I remember at the beginning of the war, there was a sense that there is an Iraqi identity that is separate from Sunni and Shia, and therefore this should work. And here we are all these years later, and it still hasn't worked.
Yeah, I have a different take on it.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that we were colossally blind, and we couldn't have done it worse. Again, Iraq has what I call a market-dominant minority. That is, they had a 15% Sunni minority that had controlled that country for centuries. First, under the Ottomans, which were a Sunni power, then under the British that favored that minority, and then under Saddam Hussein, who was a Sunni and who favored, not only did he favor the Sunnis, he persecuted the Shia majority and the Kurds. So what I actually wrote in the afterword to my 2003 book, World on Fire, I predicted it. I said, what do you think is going to happen if you have a tiny, resented minority, 15%, that has ruled this country cruelly for centuries, and now you're going to empower the resentful majority? what I said is you are going to get payback time. And that's exactly what happened. The Shia used their newly found electoral majority power to retaliate against the Sunnis. And then the Sunnis, seeing, oh my gosh, we're a minority, they joined the insurgency. And they joined Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So I think that we actually got it completely wrong. We didn't work on how to build that unifying Iraqi identity. In fact, we misunderstood that majority rule doesn't always work out to freedom and prosperity.
Well, you also tell us in the book that it's not limited to halfway around the world. Venezuela, in our own hemisphere, there still seems to have been an issue about Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and whether he was, the next clarion call for communism and trying to nationalize everything and ruin America's plans there, or what? What did you conclude?
So again, this is a very powerful concept. If you start to look at things, it's so confusing to look at the world. But if you think of unifying principles, again, I describe this concept of a market-dominant minority. And in Venezuela, they had a very small, lighter-skinned, sort of European heritage minority that largely controlled the media and the oil. So in 1998, this guy that seems crazy, Hugo Chavez, he's an ex-con, former paratrooper, not so educated, horrified the elites. He begins to campaign, and he's from the point of view of the elite, he's talking nonsense. He says things like he thought maybe capitalism had killed life on Mars, but he plays the race card. He says, look at me. He called himself the Indian from Barinas. He actually said, I have African features. And here's the thing, the country had never really talked about these racial tensions before, but it is in fact the case that despite the economy and most of the power being in the hands of lighter-skinned elite, the majority of the country was indigenous-blooded, had African heritage because there was a long legacy of slavery. And suddenly all these people they buy into his populist appeal. He says, vote for me, I look like you, and they did. And you know what? It wasn't Donald Trump that was the first tweeter-in-chief. Hugo Chavez was. He was the first leader to kind of see the power of talking straight to the people. He had a reality TV show that he conducted while he was president. He would go to a building and say, he would have millions of viewers, and he'd say, expropriate it. And people would love it. It was actually very parallel.
Let's go back to America and talk about ethnic tensions at your home. And to do that, let's just read this excerpt from the book here. White America is itself divided. Indeed, there is now so little interaction, commonality, and intermarriage between rural, heartland, working-class whites and urban coastal whites that the difference between them is practically what social scientists would consider an ethnic difference. They think of themselves as belonging to distinct and opposing political tribes. Now, this is really quite fascinating because no one thinks of, I shouldn't say no one, few people think of whites as being somehow distinctive or in different tribes. But they sure are, aren't they?
They really are. And in fact, you can see, I think this is one of the main features that explains the election of Donald Trump. Again, I've been studying what it means to be an ethnic group for 20 years, and intermarriage and commonality and interaction is a lot of it. So on the coasts where I'm from, Yale University, New York, San Francisco, the whites there tend to be very multicultural. They're probably like what you would expect in Toronto or Vancouver. Cosmopolitan, tend to be liberal, and very politically correct. That is, we know how to speak in a way that doesn't offend a lot of people. Also, surprisingly, insular. So one thing I say is a lot of cosmopolitans think of themselves as the opposite of tribal. We're global citizens. But in fact, it's a very snooty group, very judgmental. And that group is so different from Donald Trump's base.
Well, they may know Paris and Rome and London, but they may not know Montgomery, Alabama.
And they often have never been there. And not only that, there's tremendous mutual scorn and resentment. And literally, people eat different foods. They dress differently. They speak differently. And obviously, if you look at the electoral map, they voted exactly differently. And part of the resentment, and it goes both ways, a lot of the Heartland voters are much more suspicious of immigrants. They are much more negative about minorities, partly because they often have never really met one. And what they do is they associate these coastal whites with, oh, you love minorities, you love immigrants. Why are you always trying to help the poor in Africa as opposed to real Americans? And that's what Donald Trump tapped into. If you look at Make America Great Again, that is a slogan that's kind of coded. And again, if you look comparatively at other countries, you see this a lot in countries where there is a resented tiny minority. And this I would describe as what we call coastal elites. It's a weird concept.
They're not a tiny minority, though. In fact,
they're not a tiny minority.
They may be the majority, considering they voted for Hillary. And she got more votes.
That's exactly right. But from there, kind of looking at people like who control Wall Street and Washington establishment and Silicon Valley. But you're right. They're lumping all these people together. And a lot of this is perception and then demagogues whipping it up. But the more important point is they're saying they're not real Americans. And Donald Trump did very well by saying, let's take back our country. These people in charge of Washington, in charge of Wall Street, they don't care about you. They're selling the country to Canada, to Mexico, to China. Let's take back our country. And that rhetoric is something that you've seen in its own, always with a different language. In countries from Venezuela to the former Yugoslavia, Serbia for Serbs, to Zimbabwe, take back the country. So once you look at things from a world lens, it makes a lot of sense, the dynamics.
Okay, so there are these different dynamics and different splits within the white communities, if I can put it that way. Do you see similar things happening within the black communities or the Asian communities, that kind of thing?
Actually, there is a new development right now, which is in the 60s and 70s, the civil rights movement, the left, the progressives, their watchword, I still remember this, was really about inclusivity and equality. There was a sense of using these universalist terms. People looked for a time when skin color wouldn't matter. Partly what happened was during the Reagan era, a lot of progressives correctly perceived that a lot of the universalist rhetoric, oh, we're group neutral, we're talking about inclusivity and equality, was actually being used by conservatives to block affirmative action, to kind of not adopt policies that from the left's point of view was needed to correct deep racial inequities. So today, fast forward to 2018, group blindness is the ultimate sin for the left. From Black Lives Matter to all of our Asian groups it's really a sense of, look, when you talk in terms of generalities or just equality, you are ignoring the very specific experiences of group oppression that different groups have had. And that's really the talk on campuses. And I understand it. I hate the way people try to go black or white. We hate identity politics or we love identity politics. I think it's understandable. These are a lot of groups that have not been able to speak for a long time, and they're finally, finding their identity. What I lament and criticize is that you can't only be these separate tribes. And that's what I am arguing against. You can still feel a very strong sense of, I'm Chinese American, I'm Libyan American, but we can't lose that connective tissue. We also need to work on ways that we can still feel that we're all Americans. Otherwise, we're going to go the way of a country like Libya, which is also a multi-ethnic country, but it's now a failed state because that Libyan overarching identity was not enough to bind that country together because it was really a colonial construct.
Admittedly off the beaten path a little bit here, but which do you feel more connected to, your adjective or your noun?
My adjective, or you mean
the Chinese or the
part?
American?
Yeah. Oh, well, here's the thing. I think it's a false choice. And I think that's the danger. People say, which are you first?
Not first.
Or, salient. Which do you feel more? Here's the beauty of America. And by the way, I would throw Canada into this. It's very rare. I call America a supergroup, which is a country where you simultaneously have a very strong overarching identity. I'm an American. And that's the first requirement. The second requirement is that it's a country where individual subgroup identities are allowed to flourish. I'm Italian American, I'm Irish American, I'm Croatian American, and you could still be very patriotic at the same time. And a country like France doesn't have that. You see, France, they have a very strong overarching identity, the French identity, but they do not allow individual subgroup
They're not
identities.
into adjectives there.
It's interesting how you put it, but because of laïcité, they can't wear the headscarf, the burkini band, and a lot of people think that that's why they have so much radicalization, that there's a lot of unhappiness. So that's why I resist the premise. I think that in countries that are very healthy, you can have both a very strong sense of overarching national identity. I think people can be very proud of being Canadian, and yet you have these sub-tribal, subgroup, sub-regional identities that should be able to coexist if you get it right.
Absolutely right. I mean, quite agree. Having said that, there are some groups for whom the adjective becomes problematic in the eyes of some of the majority. Is that problematic in terms of tribalism in America today?
Well, it would be. I mean, I think I do think it would be very problematic for somebody who. I mean, I'm sort of old-fashioned that way. I think that it would not be good. Now we have free speech, and the way to do this, I think, is through persuasion, right? I mean, you can't control what every last person thinks. So right now in the United States, we have groups who say, look, this was a country that oppressed our ancestors. So we are struggling. And what I say is that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do need to correct our history books. We can't whitewash it and say, oh, these perfect guys came over and they did these perfect things. But nor do I think should we go all the way to the extreme and say what I hear a lot of people on the left saying, which is America is a land of oppression. It's not a land of freedom. It's it's built on white supremacy. I disagree. I think we did have white supremacy, and we still see traces of this, but it's a huge difference between saying that we are a country built on great principles, equality, tolerance, and we have shamefully failed to live up to them, and we must keep trying. There's a huge difference between saying that we are a country built on great principles, and saying that those principles are all lies, that they were never there to begin with. And so I'm sort of a romantic. I think that we need to correct the history, but we need to work on a way that formerly oppressed groups can really start to buy into the idea of America as a moral nation. And for people who feel like their groups are treated unfairly, without the same respect, they get shot disproportionately, how can you expect them to think of America as a great nation? So for me, there's work to be done both on the right and the left. And that's the problem with tribalism. They're just talking past each other, attacking the other side, demonizing each other, with no progress at all.
Well, here's the question. David Frum was in that chair not too long ago, and one of the questions that he posed in his book that no one knows the answer to yet, of course, is, are we at the beginning of the end of this tribalism? And is there a possible way back? Or is this just really the beginning of the beginning? And your country is about to descend even further into chaos. You got a view on that?
Yeah, David and I are opposites. I think it may have to do with me being an immigrant's daughter. I love his thinking. I'm an optimist. And I think he's a little bit less so. Again, maybe it's personal. I obviously am not white. My parents love the monuments, they love the founding myth, and they have experienced discrimination. So I don't think it has to be either or. And part of what I think is wrong with the dialogue in the United States is that people want to make everything either or. So the studies that I most like in my book are the ones at the very end. I collect they're so optimistic. They show that if you can pull people out of their tribal context and have them interact with each other as human beings. But I don't just mean exposure. Studies show that if you put diverse peoples together in the room and they don't really talk to each other, they can just hate each other even more. But if you pull a Trump supporter and a Trump hater and say, don't talk about politics, talk about dogs or your sports commonality or your children, what you want for your children or your favorite flower or pizza.
They'll get on fine.
Yes, and this is, norms can change, and the studies are actually astonishing. The integration of our military in the 50s, no one thought this could work, but when people threw African Americans, Mexican Americans, Italian Americans into the trenches, they quickly saw, once you have to trust your life to somebody else, or you don't care what accent they have or the color of their skin.
Amy, I want to finish up on this because one of the tribes, it seems to me, in the course of American history that has been utterly powerful and immune to any kind of facts are gun owners. And it has felt like, admittedly north of the border, we're looking from afar, it has felt like it didn't matter how much chaos or mayhem happened in your country, gun ownership, damn it, was still going to be a Second Amendment right, and there were going to be no laws passed by Congress to abridge anything having to do with that. Until recently, the Florida school shooting, again, feels like, I don't know, but it feels like an inflection point in history. Do you think so? It
could be, but here's what I'm worried about. Right after the Parkland shooting, I actually wrote about this. I thought it could be a norm-changing moment because those young high school kids suffered so much, and at the beginning, it was nonpartisan. In fact, I met some of them. Many of their parents actually owned guns, and so it wasn't really political at the beginning. It was just grieving people speaking from the heart, and you saw the polls change. You saw American public opinion really change. It moved. Here's what I'm worried about. Immediately, people had not even stopped mourning. You saw action on the left and the right, immediately trying to seize it, which is, okay, this is all about against the NRA, or the right saying these are actors, these they're not even real activists, and turning it back into this partisan thing. What worries me is that I worry that we've actually lost ground in the last month. People are viewing these big marches, and maybe there's still hope, but I've seen that people have actually retreated more, and you see that politicians are trying to say, look, this is a Democrat versus Republican thing. And the studies show that once this becomes partisan, and you can see the rhetoric changing with both sides saying, oh, those guys, they like seeing children die. And then the other side saying, oh, they're murderers. And as soon as you go into that kind of dialogue where you're attacking the other side in such harsh terms, these examples I give in my book is you don't get the progress. So fingers crossed right now, you can see the dialogue shifting. One of the survivors tweeted out saying, talk to the other side. So you see hope like that. But again,
but then you see Laura Ingraham on the other side.
You do, and you see cable news, and you see people get higher ratings if you demonize the other side. And it really, it is an inflection point. And I hope it goes the right way.
Amen. Political Tribes, Group Instinct, and the Fate of Nations. That's Amy Chua's latest contribution to our bookshelves. And we thank you very much for coming into TVO tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.